Shabbat Shalom, my friends. Well, here we are. We are in the Sedra Vayechi, and it is the last Sedra in the book of Genesis. And so this Shabbat morning, we finish Genesis, and we have what is traditionally known as a SIYYUM, a concluding feast, as we read the last words of the book. And of course, in this community, we often, those of us who wish to do so, partake of a drink known as SIYYUM, a plum brandy. But believe me, water and juice work just as well. We have bread, herring, and we proclaim Chazak, Chazak, Vanit Chazek. Let us be strong, let us be strong, let us strengthen one another. That's how we Jews end each book of the Torah. Okay, going forward, Jacob now, in this last section of Genesis, came to Egypt to be with Joseph when Jacob was 130 years old. Now, Jacob is 147, according to the text, and he knows that his time is at an end. The moment of his death is at hand, coupled with the conclusion of the book of Genesis. The scribes who assembled this material had created for us a unifying prehistory of our people. Creation, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Ur of the Chaldees to Canaan, Canaan to Egypt. The stage is now set for the birth of the Jewish people. Jacob must die, Joseph must die, so that a new king can arise in Egypt who knew not Joseph. We have an extended death scene here. Interestingly enough, this is the only such scene in the entire Torah, an extended scene. Joseph is told that his father is dying. Joseph runs to his father. Jacob, weak in his bed, struggles to pull himself up to show respect to his royal son. For Joseph, his task now is to make certain that his two sons, born in Egypt, Ephraim and Manasseh, will be accorded a status equal to Jacob's own sons. They would be treated like Reuven and Shimon, and they would take the place of a specific tribe that would bear the name of Joseph. There will be no Joseph tribe. Jacob symbolically adopts Ephraim and Manasseh, making them his children, and he then blesses each of his sons, finding words that reflect what the, in fact, descendants of each of the sons would become later on in the land of Canaan. Reuven, Shimon, Levi come in for rather brutal comments, and the tribe of Judah is blessed with words that will be interpreted by later generations to prove that the Messiah will emerge from the tribe of Judah. Jacob will die and is carried by Joseph and all of his brothers to Canaan to be buried in the cave of Machpelah with Abraham, with Isaac. And then Joseph dies, and his remains will not be brought to Canaan for burial until the time of the Exodus. The rabbis have explored this text with great intensity. After all, we're dealing with the death of a patriarch, the beginning of an incredibly transformative period in our people's history. Slavery is soon upon us. The transition from what is now a period of tranquility is to an extended period of brutal suffering. That liminal period is marked by the weakness of an old man who knows that his end is very near. But Jacob is not finished with his efforts to exercise his will. Not nearly. He will bless Ephraim and Manasseh and do it his way, not the way that their father would have expected. He will exact promises from Joseph regarding Jacob's own funeral. And then he blesses his sons with an awareness of their individual characteristics and of the future that awaits them. Aviva Zornberg finds in our text a sense of spiritual power that now emanates from Jacob. She calls that spiritual power near the moment of death as a force field in which the dying seek one last time, one last chance to shape the future. Now Jacob's words take on transformative power. Now his family is listening, with deep interest and total trepidation. The dying struggle to hold on to power, and the family is receiving its most precious inheritance. Jacob will not go quietly into the night. Our rabbinic commentators are captivated by the scene. As Jacob spoke, there was a pervasive darkness that often accompanies impending death. No one can clearly see what will come next. They were in Egypt, but their promised land was Canaan and not Egypt. Despite the relative comfort in Goshen, their welfare was totally dependent upon a foreign king and his trusted second in command. But kings die, and new kings bring in their own trusted second in command. This Pharaoh might very well have been impressed by the elderly Jacob, and this Pharaoh clearly owed Joseph a great deal. But in the presence of death, there was now a darkness that was very unsettling. Not having the interpretive tools that our generation has, Rashi and others were struck by how the blessings of Jacob for each son, for each tribe, in fact, foreshadowed what would be happening to that tribe in the not distant future. This tribe would rise to prominence. That tribe would be so weakened that it would be absorbed by another. Judah will reign. Benjamin will be a ravaging wolf. And the tribe of Dan will face treachery and disaster. The dying can see despite the blindness of old age. The dying can see perhaps because of the blindness of old age. And a dying patriarch most certainly has access to realms that we have to assume are blocked off from the rest of us. Jacob clearly saw the near future and shared what he saw, but the Midrash tells us that at that moment, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Shekhinah, the presence of God, suddenly departed from Jacob. Chapter 49 of Genesis begins with these words, "Gather around me," Jacob said, "so that I might tell you what shall befall you in the days to come." Jacob's words are phrased as blessings, but within those blessings are foretellings. Later rabbis would insist that Jacob's foretellings moved from the near future and began to reveal messianic times. And it was then, suddenly, that the divine inspiration abandoned him. Now, not only was Jacob physically blind, but he was left practically speechless as well. At the very moment that his eyes were opened the widest, he was forbidden to share what he had come to know. Why? It would have been so much easier if the future had become an open book, so that the descendants of Jacob would know how best to survive a rapidly changing and often dangerous world. If Jacob could have shared what he was seeing, then perhaps life would have been easier for them to navigate, and the end of times would not always appear to be so very frightening. But his family would receive no word of the impending slavery. Victories and defeats would not be known before they actually occurred. Jacob's family, his survivors, would never be told whether or not they would, to the end of time, actually still be survivors. That blindness regarding the future is the ultimate tragedy of life. And that blindness regarding the future is also the driving force that should make us aware of the potential implications of our actions. If we cannot be allowed to actually know where our actions are leading us, then we have a reason to live each day reaching into that storehouse that contains our spiritual, intellectual, and moral strength, and doing the best that we humanly can. If we cannot know the future, then we can at least know that if we don't pick ourselves up when we stumble, then no one else will pick us up. As the book of Genesis ends, Jacob, according to the Midrash, is allowed a vision of end times, but he is forbidden to share it. Life is intended to be lived in uncertainty, because responding to that uncertainty is a rare and very precious human gift. Next week, as we begin the book of Exodus, pieces of that certainty will come more sharply into focus. And our people's responses will become their very own birth pangs. Shabbat Shalom. See you next year. See you next year, yeah.